It was one of those brutal Monday mornings in the dead of winter, the kind where the wind howls through the empty streets of Redfield, Tennessee, like it's got a personal grudge against anyone dumb enough to step outside. The whole town was coated in a thin sheet of ice, turning the single main road into a slippery hazard. Redfield wasn't much to look at. A handful of weathered wooden houses scattered along the roadside, an old gas station with pumps that looked like they'd seen better days back in the 70s, and that towering relic of a building smack in the center. It used to be a grand hotel in the 1950s, all glamour and big dreams, but now it was just a 20-story hulk repurposed into a ragtag commercial space. Shops on the lower floors, offices crammed in the middle, and up top, folks like Amelia Thornton scraping by with whatever they could sell. Me, I'm Ethan Harper, 28 years old, white guy with a face that's seen too many long shifts and not enough sleep. I was bundled up in my faded thick coat, the one with the frayed cuffs that barely kept the chill out, and my old baseball cap pulled low over my eyes. I worked for the local delivery service, hauling packages around this forgotten corner of the state. It wasn't glamorous, hell, it wasn't even steady, but it paid the bills and kept me moving. That morning, I had a box clutched under my arm, labeled for personal delivery to Amelia Thornton on the top floor. She ran some kind of pottery shop up there, selling handmade knickknacks and odds and ends she crafted herself. I'd never met her, but the address was clear. Suite 2001, the penthouse level, if you could call it that in a dump like this. I parked my beat-up truck at the base of the building, the engine sputtering in protest against the cold. The wind slapped my face as I stepped out carrying the package like it was made of glass. The lobby was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs that buzzed like angry bees. I jabbed the elevator button a few times, but nothing happened. Then I saw the sign, a crooked yellow placard dangling from a chain scrawled with "out of order" in faded marker. Great, just what I needed on a day like this. I sighed, my breath fogging the air, and tightened my grip on the box. 20 floors, no way around it. I pushed through the stairwell door, the hinges creaking like they hadn't been oiled since the building was new. The stairs were a nightmare. Narrow wooden steps slick with condensation from the freezing air seeping through cracks in the walls. Each one groaned under my boots, echoing up the empty shaft. The cold bit deeper with every level, and by the time I hit the third floor, my legs were already burning. I paused for a second to catch my breath, leaning against the railing, when suddenly the door to the third floor landing burst open with a sharp bang. There she was, Amelia Thornton, though I didn't know her name yet. She was in her early 40s with platinum hair tied back in a neat bun, wearing a thick wool coat that hung loose over her frame. Her face was twisted in pain, one hand gripping the wall for support, the other hovering over her ankle. She tried to take a step forward but winced, nearly collapsing. Her breath came out in ragged puffs, visible in the chilly air of the stairwell. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, her voice strained but steady. She looked up and saw me standing there, frozen like an idiot with my package in hand. Her eyes, sharp, green, and full of frustration, locked onto mine. You're the delivery guy?" I nodded, still processing the scene. "Yeah, Ethan Harper. Got a package for Amelia Thornton up on 20. Stairwell's the only way, I guess." She let out a short, bitter laugh that turned into a grimace. "That's me. But my ankle. I twisted it bad last night, slipping on these stupid steps. Can't put weight on it." She tried another step, her hand trembling on the wall, but her leg buckled and she gasped in pain. I set the box down carefully on the landing, my mind racing. The wind whistled through a nearby window crack, sending a shiver down my spine. She was breathing heavily now, her face pale against the dim light filtering in. "I have a meeting up there," she said, her voice cracking just a bit. "In the display room on 20. If I don't make it, I'll lose the biggest contract I've ever had. These buyers are coming from Nashville. They won't wait." The words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. I glanced at the stairs stretching endlessly upward, the cold seeping into my bones. 20 floors. With a stranger on my back? It sounded insane. But there she was, vulnerable in a way that hit me hard, alone in this crumbling building, fighting through pain for something she built with her own hands. I met her eyes again, seeing the mix of pride and fear there. Without thinking, I stepped closer. "If you don't mind," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I could carry you up, on my back. It's the only way you'll get there in time. She stared at me, her mouth opening in surprise. For a second, I thought she'd laugh it off or tell me to buzz off. But then her expression softened, and she let out a shaky breath. You're serious? Dead serious, I replied, crouching down a bit to make it easier. I've hauled heavier loads before. Just hold on tight. She hesitated, her hand hovering near my shoulder. The wind howled louder outside, rattling the old windows. Finally, she nodded, a quiet resolve settling over her. Okay, let's do this. I turned around and she carefully draped her arms over my shoulders, her body pressing against my back as she shifted her weight. She was lighter than I expected, but the awkwardness hit me immediately. The warmth of her against the cold air, her breath on my neck as I straightened up. Ready? I asked. Ready? She whispered. The climb started slow, each step a deliberate push against gravity. The stairs creaked ominously under our combined weight, and the box I'd left behind on the third floor felt like a forgotten promise. I'd have to come back for it later. By the fifth floor, my thighs were on fire, sweat trickling down my back despite the chill. Amelia's grip tightened, her fingers digging into my coat. You okay? I grunted, pausing for a split second on a landing. I'm fine, she said, but her voice was tight. Don't stop, we can't. The wind picked up, sneaking through the gaps, making the whole building moan like it was alive. On the 8th floor, a loose step shifted under my boot and I stumbled forward, my heart slamming in my chest. Amelia gasped, her arms clamping harder around me. Whoa! Hold on! I caught myself against the railing, breathing hard. The drop down the stairwell looked endless in the shadows. Sorry, she murmured. This is crazy. You don't have to. Yes, I do, I cut her off, pushing onward. We're halfway, no turning back. As we climbed higher, the air grew thinner, colder, the echoes of our footsteps bouncing off the walls. By the 12th floor, my lungs burned, every breath a rasp. Amelia's head rested lightly against my shoulder now, her body relaxing just a fraction into the rhythm of my steps. I could feel her heartbeat against my back, fast, unsteady, mirroring mine. The intimacy of it all hit me like a freight train. Two strangers bound together in this absurd, grueling ascent. Her trust in me, absolute. 15th floor. My legs screamed in protest, but I focused on the end, the top, where her future waited. Tell me about the contract, I said between breaths, trying to distract us both. She hesitated, then spoke softly. It's for a chain of stores. My pottery. It's all I have. If this falls through, it won't, I promised, gritting my teeth as we hit the 17th. The wind roared louder up here, shaking the building like it wanted to tear us down. Finally, the 20th floor. I staggered through the door, gently lowering her onto a nearby bench. My muscles ached, sweat soaking through my shirt, but the look on her face, relief mixed with something deeper, made it worth every step. She straightened up, her eyes meeting mine. No one's ever done anything like that for me. After that climb, the display room on the 20th floor felt like a different world. The buyers from Nashville had already arrived, milling around with their clipboards and serious expressions, eyeing the rows of handmade pottery Amelia had set up. She hobbled in on my arm, her face flushed from the effort but determined. I lingered in the doorway just long enough to watch her switch into professional mode, straightening her coat, flashing a confident smile, and diving right into her pitch. It was impressive, the way she commanded the space despite the pain. I didn't stick around for the whole thing, I had other deliveries piling up. But as I headed back down those godforsaken stairs, grabbing my abandoned box on the 3rd floor, I couldn't shake the image of her up there, fighting for her livelihood. A couple of hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Amelia. The meeting went great. They signed on. Come by the shop later if you're free. I owe you dinner. I stared at the screen for a minute, surprised she'd even asked for my number from the delivery slip. Part of me wanted to brush it off, chalk it up to gratitude and move on. But curiosity won out. After wrapping up my shift, I swung back by the building. The elevator was still out, so it was another trek up, but this time without the urgency or the extra weight. My legs protested, but I pushed through. When I reached the top, the shop door was propped open, a warm glow spilling out into the hallway. Amelia's place was tucked away in the corner suite, a cozy mishmash of shelves lined with glazed pots, mugs, and quirky sculptures she'd shaped by hand. The air smelled of clay and faint wood smoke from a small stove in the back. She was there, limping around with a makeshift crutch fashioned from a broomstick, setting a small table in the room behind the counter. It wasn't fancy, just a couple of wooden chairs, a checkered cloth, and a flickering lantern to chase away the winter gloom. "You made it," she said, her voice lighter than before, though she still winced when she put weight on her ankle. "I wasn't sure you would." "Couldn't pass up a free meal," I replied with a grin, stepping inside and shrugging off my coat. I hung it on a hook by the door, feeling oddly at home in the space. She gestured for me to sit, then busied herself at the stove. Soon, she brought over 2 steaming mugs of herbal tea, mint from what I could smell, and a plate with thick slices of cornbread fresh from the oven, slathered in butter that melted right into the crumb. I took a sip of the tea, the warmth spreading through me like a balm against the cold I'd been fighting all day. As I bit into the cornbread, I glanced around the room more closely. It was lived in, personal. Stacks of sketchbooks on a side table, half-finished paintings leaning against the walls, and tools scattered on a workbench. It struck me how isolated it all felt, up here in this forgotten building. But there was a quiet strength to it, like she'd carved out her own world. "People think I'm crazy for this," Amelia said suddenly, settling into the chair across from me with a slight groan. She flexed her fingers, and I noticed the calluses, rough, earned from hours at the wheel. Ditching the city life, a steady job in marketing, to come out here and mold clay into pots for strangers. They say I'm hiding or something. But up here, I feel more real than I ever did in those high rises. I watched her as she spoke, my eyes tracing the lines on her hands, the way they moved with purpose even now. Those weren't the hands of someone who'd given up. They were the hands of a fighter. Behind her, a half-painted canvas caught the light, a landscape of rolling Tennessee hills smudged with earthy tones that matched the pottery around us. It was raw, unfinished, but beautiful in its honesty. "You're not crazy," I said, setting my mug down. "You're just braver than the folks who stay stuck where they don't belong. Takes guts to start over like that." She looked at me then, really looked, her green eyes softening in a way that made my chest tighten. It wasn't the polite smile you'd give a stranger. It was the kind that comes when someone sees through the walls you've built. We sat there for a moment in comfortable silence, the stove crackling softly. Then she asked about me, my job, why I stuck around Redfield. I told her the basics, grew up nearby, bounced between odd jobs after high school, ended up delivering because it kept me on the move and out of trouble. But as the conversation flowed, I found myself opening up more about the loneliness of small-town life, the way days blurred together, and how I'd always felt like I was just passing through. She listened without interrupting, nodding in places that hit home. "Sounds familiar," she said quietly. "I came here to escape that blur, but sometimes the quiet up here, it echoes." By the time we finished eating, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows through the windows. I helped clear the table, careful not to bump her ankle, and for the first time that day, the cold outside felt a little less biting. As I grabbed my coat to leave, she touched my arm lightly. "Thanks again, Ethan, not just for the climb." "Anytime," I said, meaning it more than I expected. From that first dinner onward, something shifted in my routine. I'd always been the guy who stuck to his routes, delivering packages without much thought beyond getting the job done, and heading home to my quiet apartment on the edge of town. But now, whenever a shipment popped up for the old building, I'd volunteer for it, even if it meant tweaking my schedule. It wasn't just about the climb anymore, it was about seeing Amelia, checking in on her ankle, and maybe lingering a little longer than necessary. The elevator got fixed a few days after our ordeal. Some maintenance crew finally showed up with tools and grumbles. But I still took the stairs half the time, claiming it was for the exercise. Truth was, those creaky steps had become a weird sort of ritual, a reminder of that crazy morning. Amelia's shop started feeling familiar, like a second stop on my daily circuit. I'd drop off whatever package I had, then find excuses to help out. One afternoon, I noticed a leaky faucet in her backroom sink, dripping steadily onto the concrete floor. "Let me fix that," I said, rolling up my sleeves without waiting for an answer. She watched from her stool at the pottery wheel, her hands covered in wet clay, shaping a vase with steady, practiced motions. The drip stopped after 20 minutes of tinkering, and she rewarded me with a fresh cup of coffee from her ancient percolator. Another time, a heavy crate of supplies arrived at the base of the building, glazes and tools she ordered from out of state. I hauled it up without a second thought, my back protesting less each visit as I got used to the load. She'd thank me with one of her quiet smiles, the kind that crinkled the corners of her eyes, and I'd end up staying to help unpack, stacking jars on shelves while she explained the differences between matte and glossy finishes. Some days, I didn't even have a delivery. I'd just swing by after my shift, claiming I was in the neighborhood. I'd lean against the counter, watching her work the clay, her fingers pressing and pulling, turning a lump of earth into something beautiful. There was a rhythm to it, hypnotic almost, the wheel spinning under her control. I'd hand her tools when she needed them, or just sit quietly, letting the silence fill with the hum of the kiln in the background. It wasn't awkward. It felt natural, like we'd fallen into an unspoken routine. The town outside kept its winter grip, gray skies, biting winds, but up there, in her warm, cluttered space, time slowed down. Then came the rain. It started one evening as I was finishing a drop-off, the sky opening up like it had been holding back for weeks. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and sheets of water pounded the roof, turning the world outside the windows into a blurry mess. "You can't head out in that," Amelia said, glancing up from her workbench where she was glazing a set of mugs. "Stay a while, it'll pass." I nodded, pulling up a stool by the window. We sat there side by side, watching the drops race down the glass, the old building groaning under the storm's weight. The lantern on the table cast a soft glow, flickering with each gust that snuck through the cracks. She poured us more tea, chamomile this time, steaming and herbal, and we talked. Or rather, she did at first. "You know," she said softly, her voice barely above the rain's patter, "I had a life before this place. A fiancé back in the city. He promised the world, marriage, a house, the whole dream. Then one day he just vanished. No note, no call, left me with nothing but questions and a heart that felt like it had been shattered into pieces I couldn't put back together." I listened, my hands wrapped around the warm mug, the steam rising between us. Her words hung heavy, laced with old pain she rarely let show. She stared out at the downpour, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "That's why I keep people at arm's length now. I live like that kiln over there, hot enough to shape what I want. But I don't let anyone get too close. Burns too much when they leave." The rain intensified, drumming harder on the roof, as if urging me to respond. I set my mug down, my gaze dropping to her hand. The calluses from her work, the faint scars from years of crafting. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers brushing lightly against her wrist, feeling the roughness there under my touch. She didn't pull away. "I've been left behind too," I admitted, my voice low. "Grew up with a dad who promised he'd stick around, then bailed when I was a kid. Mom raised me alone, working 2 jobs. I've spent years building walls, thinking it's safer that way. But watching you up here, turning clay into art, it makes me wonder if I'm missing out." She turned to me then, her eyes searching mine in the dim light. The storm raged on outside, but in that moment, the air between us felt charged, closer. We shared more. Stories of betrayals, small victories, the quiet aches that small-town life amplified. A glance lingered a second too long. A casual touch on the arm felt intentional. The rain blurred the world beyond the window, making her shop feel like the only place that mattered. As the hours slipped by, the downpour didn't let up, but neither did we. That night, the cold outside couldn't touch us. A week after that rainy night, my truck decided to throw a tantrum. The engine coughed and sputtered on my way to a delivery, forcing me to pull over on the side of the icy road. I spent half an hour under the hood, fingers numb from the cold, coaxing it back to life with a few jury-rigged fixes. By the time I made it to Amelia's building, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gray. The elevator was working again, but habit kicked in. I took the stairs anyway, my boots echoing in the quiet shaft. When I reached the top, her shop door was half closed, the warm light inside spilling out like an invitation. She was there, locking up for the day, her ankle still bandaged but moving a bit easier now. When she saw me, her face lit up with that quiet smile I'd started looking forward to. "Ethan, you're late today," she said, not an accusation but with a teasing edge. In her hand was a small paper bag. the kind you'd get from a bakery spotted with grease. Truck trouble, I explained, wiping my hands on my jeans as if the grime from earlier still lingered. Figured I'd swing by anyway, see how you're holding up. She held out the bag. Good timing. I baked these this morning, ginger snaps. Thought you might like them. I took it, the warmth seeping through the paper, the spicy scent hitting me immediately. Smells amazing, thanks. She paused, key in hand, then tilted her head slightly. You eaten yet? Come in for dinner. I've got stew simmering in the back. I hesitated for a split second. My apartment waited with its empty fridge and silence, but the offer felt too genuine to turn down. Yeah, all right, if it's no trouble. No trouble at all, she replied, unlocking the door and leading me inside. The shop was dimmer now, the shelves of pottery casting long shadows in the fading light. We moved to the back room, her kitchen nook, where a pot bubbled on the stove. The air was thick with the rich aroma of beef stew. Carrots, onions, herbs stewing together in a way that made my stomach rumble. She pulled out a bottle of red wine from a cabinet, popping the cork with practiced ease and pouring 2 glasses. It's nothing fancy, she said, handing me one, but it's hearty. Sits well on a cold night like this. We sat at the small table, the one with the checkered cloth from our first dinner, under the soft glow of a hanging bulb. I didn't know what to say at first. The intimacy of it all, sharing a meal again, felt heavier now after that rainy confession. But words weren't needed right away. She ladled stew into bowls, steam rising in curls, and we ate in companionable quiet at first, the clink of spoons against ceramic the only sound. The flavors were deep, comforting, slow-cooked tenderness that warmed me from the inside out. As the meal went on, conversation flowed easier. We talked about our stumbles, the people who'd let us down, the regrets that lingered like shadows. She shared more about her ex, the one who'd vanished, how it had left her questioning everything. I built walls after that, she admitted, swirling her wine. Figured it was safer. But lately, those walls feel thinner. I nodded, setting my spoon down. I've got my own ghosts. Jobs that went nowhere, relationships that fizzled because I was too scared to commit. But being up here, helping out, it's making me rethink a lot. The lantern on the table flickered, casting dancing lights across her face. When we'd finished, she cleared the plates, and I helped, our hands brushing once or twice in the small space. Then, from an old radio on the shelf, a soft country tune crackled to life. Something slow and twangy about lost loves and second chances. Amelia turned it up a notch, a mischievous glint in her eye. She extended her hand across the table. Dance with me? I laughed, caught off guard. Here? Now? I'm no dancer. Neither am I, she said, her voice light. But why not? I took her hand, her palm warm against mine, and we stood. The dance wasn't anything structured, no fancy steps or spins. We just swayed in the cramped kitchen, her good foot guiding us in lazy circles, careful of her ankle. The music wrapped around us, the stew's warmth still lingering in the air. It felt right, effortless, like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, and I could smell the faint clay on her skin, mixed with the herbs from dinner. As the song faded, she pulled back slightly, her hand on my shoulder. I never thought I'd do something like this at my age, I whispered back, my voice low. And I never thought I'd be invited by someone who makes me want to stay. The night unfolded from there, unplanned and unhurried. We talked more, laughed at old stories, the wine loosening the last of our guards. One thing led to another, a lingering touch, a shared look, and before I knew it, we were in her small living area behind the shop, the world outside forgotten. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was honest, a connection built on those shared vulnerabilities. That night, in the quiet of her space, with the winter wind howling faintly beyond the walls, we found something neither of us had expected. From that unexpected night onward, my visits to Amelia's shop became more than just drop-ins or favors. They turned into a rhythm, a part of my day I looked forward to without admitting it out loud. I'd finish my deliveries early if I could, swinging by with a thermos of hot coffee from the gas station down the road, the kind with just enough cream to cut the bitterness, the way she'd mentioned she liked it once. She'd be at her wheel, hands deep in clay, and I'd set the cup down beside her without a word, watching as she wiped her fingers on a rag and took a sip. Perfect, she'd say, her eyes meeting mine with that quiet gratitude. I found ways to help without being asked. One blustery afternoon, I noticed the window frames rattling in the wind, letting drafts sneak in and chill the room. Mind if I fix that? I asked, already pulling out my toolkit from the truck. She nodded, and I spent the next hour sealing the gaps with weather stripping I'd picked up on my lunch break. The shop felt warmer after, and she'd insist on paying me back with a fresh-baked pie or a handmade mug, etched with simple patterns that reminded me of the hills outside town. Another time, the backyard behind the building, more of an overgrown patch than a proper yard, needed clearing after a storm knocked branches everywhere. I grabbed a rake and got to work, piling debris while she brought out lemonade, sitting on the stoop to keep me company. We'd talk about nothing and everything, the latest town gossip, her ideas for new pottery designs, my frustrations with the delivery routes that took me through endless back roads. Evenings stretched longer too. I'd stay after closing, listening as she read passages from old books stacked on her shelves. Faded novels about pioneers and lost loves, her voice steady and soothing against the creak of the building settling. The winter dragged on, but those moments made it bearable. I'd sit by the stove, flames crackling, while she turned pages, her words painting pictures warmer than the fire. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was steady, like the way she shaped her clay. Patient, deliberate. One evening, the power went out across Redfield. A fierce windstorm had knocked down lines somewhere, plunging the town into darkness. I was already at the shop, helping her inventory supplies, when the lights flickered and died. The sudden black was disorienting, the only sound the howl outside and the distant rumble of thunder. "Great," she muttered, fumbling for matches in a drawer. I used my phone's flashlight to guide her, and soon we had candles lit, scattered on the table, their flames dancing shadows across the walls. The shop felt smaller, more intimate, isolated from the world below. We sat close on the worn couch in the back, wrapped in blankets she'd pulled from a chest. The cold seeped in despite the sealed windows, but the candle's glow pushed it back. "This town's falling apart," I said, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed softly, pulling the blanket tighter. "Like us, maybe." Then her expression turned thoughtful, the candlelight highlighting the lines around her eyes, marks of years I hadn't lived but could appreciate. "Ethan, I'm not sure what this is. It's not the kind of love they write about in novels. No grand gestures, no fairy tale endings." I looked at her, the words hitting closer than expected. The wind rattled the panes, but I felt anchored there, with her. "But it's something I never had before," I replied without hesitation. "A place to come back to. Someone who sees me, not just the delivery guy hauling boxes upstairs." She reached out, her hand finding mine in the dim light, fingers intertwining. We didn't say more for a while, just sat there, listening to the storm rage. The power stayed off through the night, but we didn't mind. We talked about fears, the ones that kept us guarded, and dreams we'd buried. By morning, when the lights buzzed back on, something had solidified between us. Not a label, not a promise, but a quiet understanding. We kept it to ourselves. No announcements to the town, no rings or vows. Redfield was small, whispers traveled fast, and neither of us wanted the judgment. I'd park a block away sometimes, slipping up the stairs like it was just another delivery. But in her shop, it was different. We'd share meals, work side by side, steal moments when the world wasn't watching. The loneliness of the town, the empty streets, the endless winters, felt less oppressive with her. We'd overcome small hurdles. A bad day at work for me, a slow sales week for her, the isolation that came with living on the fringes. But we faced them together, her strength bolstering mine, my presence easing hers. In the end, it wasn't about drama or perfection, it was about showing up. My coat hung permanently by her door now, a silent signal that I was there to stay. Every cold glance we shared across the room, every time our hands brushed in passing, it reaffirmed what we had. A real connection, forged in quiet acts and shared silences. And in a town as cold as Redfield, that was enough to keep the warmth alive.